Mayor Sanders got a lot of attention recently, not only with his 10-vote victory out of about 9,500 votes cast, but mostly because he is a socialist.
45 years, Americans have been listening to great speeches.
You have maybe 2% of the population that owns 1/3 of the entire wealth of America, 80% of the stocks, 90% of the bonds. And these people have incredible power. They sit on huge corporations like the Chase Manhattan Bank, the multinational corporations, and they determine the destiny of our entire country.
And at the end of the day, the average American worker is not making a nickel more than he or she did in real wages over those 45 years.
What we talk about is the fact that in our society, theoretically a democratic society, you have a handful of people who control our economy.
The truth is that real change always takes place. Real change always takes place from the bottom on up, never from the top on down.
Increasingly, people are frustrated and angry about a two-party system, which is dominated by big money.
In this campaign, I am so proud that we have over 1 million volunteers. We have some of the strongest grassroots organizations. We have raised more individual contributions than any candidate in American history.
If hindsight is 20/20, this is truly the year of Bernie Sanders, and his clear-eyed vision, spanning 5 decades of public service, fuels his vision of the American dream for every citizen in this country. No other candidate in the history of American politics has amassed donations at the level Bernie has. Over $34 million in the last quarter alone, raised from individual donors who are as diverse as the threads in our shared tapestry of common experience.
If it's Trump, how do you see the country in 4 years? Probably World War III would be my guess.
What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago. A lot of lives would have been saved. Just recently, Soleimani led the brutal repression of protesters in Iran. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war.
See, it's like somebody setting a fire to a basket full of paper and then putting it out.
He was just doing a limited strike.
Oh, just a limited strike. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I just didn't know that it's okay to simply attack another country with bombs. Just a limited strike. That's an act of warfare.
Probably World War III would be my guess.
Trump began pushing the United States into war with Iran using false flags. He started with a U.S. tanker.
Iran did do it, and you know they did it because you saw the boat. I guess one of the mines didn't explode, and it's probably got essentially Iran written all over it.
There was no evidence that Iran had attacked the tanker, and even Bernie Sanders would share considerable skepticism over the incident.
First of all, what is absolutely necessary is an objective investigation as to these incidents. In fact, the owner of the tanker that was attacked disagrees with Trump.
Trump would once again attempt to create conflict with Iran, this time over drone warfare. Again, the incident was brushed off. Later, an incident revolving around the U.S. Embassy would also be blamed on Iran as well. At the beginning of 2020, Donald Trump and the United States government led Iranian General Soleimani to his death in Iraq. This was rightfully defined as a war crime, and an offense that led to Iran retaliating with airstrikes in Iraq. Bernie Sanders would again speak out against Trump's actions.
This is a dangerous escalation that brings us closer to another disastrous war in the Middle East, which could cost countless lives and trillions more dollars and lead to even more death, more conflict, more displacement in that already highly volatile region of the world. When I voted against the war in Iraq in 2002, I feared that it would result in greater destabilization in that country and in the entire region. At that time, I warned about the deadly so-called unintended consequences of a unilateral invasion. Today, 17 years later, that fear has unfortunately turned out to be a truth.
Donald Trump got elected by the same people he oppresses today. He's not for the working class and their needs. He believes the current minimum wage is sufficient for the working class families of America. In Trump's first year as president, he outsourced over 10,000 jobs overseas, something he said he would never do. And in 2020, Trump is also wanting to propose cutting Social Security for the elderly and the disabled, also something he said he wouldn't do. Trump's very foreign policy makes him a war criminal, bombing 7 countries in the first year of his presidency, just as many as Barack Obama. The similarities don't end there. Trump has dropped as many bombs as Obama. Under the Trump administration, war crimes have been committed through drone strikes. Human rights have been violated under the Trump administration as well. Trump's voters don't recognize the same policies Obama carried, Trump carries as well. Trump's very actions are putting us further in debt, while leading America into a path of destruction. Trump's far-right policies have dismantled the EPA. The Trump administration has even attacked education in favor of private schooling. The Trump administration has been very unkind to the working class families of America.
Is the United States government operating concentration camps? According to academic experts, yes, and the people inside are being sexually abused. The U.S. government is also committing atrocities, including human trafficking. The United States needs to abolish ICE. Concentration camps shouldn't exist.
You should vote for Trump. You should vote for Trump. You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that. No one has proved that. No.
I was disappointed to hear that Bernie is sending his volunteers out to trash me.
Elizabeth Warren is a very good friend of mine. You have heard me give many speeches. Have I ever said one negative word about Elizabeth Warren?
You called me a liar on national TV?
What?
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
Let's not do it right now. You want to have that discussion, we'll have that discussion. You called me, you told me. All right, let's not do it now.
I don't want to get involved. I just want to say hi, Bernie.
Yeah, good. Okay.
In December 2019, a glitch occurred, knocking off thousands of voters from the rolls and forcing them off their Democratic registration. Back in October, it was reported 100,000 registration errors found by the DMV.
In January, a non-Bernie volunteer wrote a statement that Politico turned into news. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren would respond.
Just reporting out from my colleague in Politico this morning about the Bernie Sanders campaign and the way that they are talking about you at the doors here in Iowa, basically saying that your voters are people who will vote Democrat anyway, that you don't bring new bases into the Democratic tent. Why is he wrong?
I was disappointed to hear that Bernie is sending his volunteers out to trash me. Bernie knows me and has known me for a long time.
I got to tell you, I think this is a little bit of a media blow-up that kind of wants conflict. Elizabeth Warren is a very good friend of mine. You have heard me give many speeches. Have I ever said one negative word about Elizabeth Warren?
The New York Times reported that Warren also accused Bernie of telling her in private that a woman couldn't be president. Fox News would later report on Bernie's stance regarding a woman president, contradicting the statements made by Elizabeth Warren and the New York Times.
The real issue is not whether you're black or white, whether you're a woman or a man. In my view, a woman could be elected president of the United States. The real issue is, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of workers and poor people, or are you on the side of big money and the corporations?
In 1987, Bernie encouraged girls to run for president. There is a video of this. In 1988, Bernie said a woman could be president. There is a video of this as well. In 2015, Bernie encouraged Elizabeth Warren to run for president. Now in 2020, 4 people who wish to remain anonymous claim Bernie Sanders said a woman can't win. There's no video of this, and there's no evidence that it was even said.
So Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, What did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
I disagreed.
After the debate, Elizabeth Warren would confront Bernie Sanders and accuse him of calling her a liar.
Simmering feud between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders suddenly boiled over.
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
What?
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
Let's not do it right now. You want to have that discussion, we'll have that discussion. You called me, you told me. All right, let's not do it now.
I don't want to get in the middle of it. I just want to say hi, Bernie.
Yeah, good. Okay.
But the end of these two wars affords us an opportunity. It allows us to refocus our intelligence and military assets and resources to other parts of the world where they are needed, where we face new challenges. This is the world you are graduating into. This is what I want to talk about today with you for a few minutes. I believe we, and particularly you, your class, has an incredible window of opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order.
The greatest threat on this front springs from the distinct illiberal and external actors who equate their success with fracturing the liberal international order. We see it in Asia and the Middle East, where China and Iran would clearly prefer a world in which they have overwhelming sway in their regions. And I'll not mince words. This movement is principally led by Russia. The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order, because the global order is changing again. And the institutions and the rules that worked so well in the post-World War II era for decades, they need to be strengthened.
Biden doubles down on racist myths. It wouldn't be the last time. Biden has always had problems connecting with Black American voters.
In a conversation about how to deal with segregation in schools back in 1975, you told a reporter, "I don't feel responsible for the sins of my father and grandfather. I feel responsible for what the situation is today, for the sins of my own generation, and I'll be damned if I feel responsible to pay for what happened 300 years ago." You said that some 40 years ago. But as you stand here tonight, what responsibility do you think that Americans need to take to repair the legacy of slavery in our country?
Look, there is institutional segregation in this country. And from the time I got involved, I started dealing with that. Redlining, banks, making sure that we are in a position where, look, we talk about education. I propose that what we take is those very poor schools, the Title I schools, triple the amount of money we spend, from $15 to $45 billion a year. Give every single teacher a raise to the equal raise of getting out the $60,000 level. Number two, make sure that we bring in to help the teachers deal with the problems that come from home. The problems that come from home, we have one school psychologist for every 1,500 kids in America today. It's crazy. The teachers are, and I'm married to a teacher. My deceased wife is a teacher. They have every problem coming to them. We have to make sure that every single child does, in fact, have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds go to school, not daycare, school. We bring social workers into homes of parents to help them deal with how to raise their children. It's not that they don't want to help. They don't know quite what to do. Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. Make sure the kids hear words. A kid coming from a very poor school, or a very poor background, will hear 4 million words fewer spoken by the time they get there.
Biden says, quote, "For decades, white politicians have blamed Black parents rather than the legacy of racism for the disparities in achievement." Biden also claims that Black parents may not participate in their children's schooling due to embarrassment about their own lack of education.
Does Joe Biden have outdated views on race? The former vice president faced criticism recently for his handling of racial issues, both for his past policy positions and for comments he's made on the subject. Cory Booker called for Biden to apologize for his comments about working with senators who supported segregation during the 1970s and 80s. Senator Kamala Harris forcefully rebuked his opposition to busing policies designed to desegregate schools. He routinely took policy positions that kowtowed to white racial fears and had a negative impact on Black and brown Americans.
Joe Biden attacks Bernie's campaign to cover a lie. Biden claims that someone working on the Bernie campaign made a doctored video of him agreeing with Paul Ryan on Social Security.
Let's get the record straight. I'm not going to blame anybody, but, well, let me just say the facts. There's a little doctored video going around saying that, put out by, put out by one of Bernie's people. No, I'm serious. And I don't know if my staff has that video here, but saying that I agreed with Paul Ryan, the former vice presidential candidate, about wanting to privatize Social Security. It is, and PolitiFact looked at it, and they doctored the photo. They doctored the piece, and it's acknowledged that it's a fake. But it is simply a lie, that video that's going around. This is a doctored tape, and I think it's beneath, and I'm looking for his campaign to come forward and disown it, but they haven't done it yet.
The truth is, there was no doctored video, and Joe Biden did agree with Paul Ryan's position on Social Security and Medicare.
Paul Ryan was correct. When he did the tax code, what's the first thing he decided we had to go after? Social Security and Medicare.
But, Senator, we have a deficit. We have Social Security and Medicare looming. The number of people on Social Security and Medicare is now 40 million people. It's going to be 80 million in 15 years. Would you consider looking at those programs, age of eligibility,
Absolutely.
cost of living, put it all on the table?
The answer is absolutely. You have to. I mean, it's one of the things that my, the political advisors say to me is, whoa, don't touch that third. Look, the American people aren't stupid. It's a real simple proposition.
I mean, whatever happened to that old conservative discipline about paying for what you spend? I'm up for re-election this year, and I'm going to remind everybody what I did at home, which is going to cost me politically. When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried it a fourth time.
Bernie Sanders would apologize for a supporter's attack on Biden. However, Bernie would not leave Biden's attacks on Social Security unnoticed. This would lead to Joe Biden losing his cool.
Well, yesterday you said you accepted Bernie's apology, and now you're attacking him. Why are you doing that? Why wasn't his apology enough, Mr. Vice President? Why attack Sanders?
Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. He apologized for saying that I was corrupt. He didn't say anything about whether or not I was telling the truth about Social Security.
Thank you guys. In January, Trump made a shocking revelation about the impeachment trial for the Senate. Trump claims that Pelosi delayed the impeachment to prevent Bernie Sanders from winning the primary election to favor Biden.
Quote, they are rigging the election again against Bernie Sanders, just like the last time, only even more obvious. They are bringing him out of so important Iowa in order that as a senator, he sits through the impeachment hoax trial. Crazy Nancy thereby gives the strong edge to sleepy Joe Biden. Donald Trump, Twitter.
Shockingly, this turned out to be true in many ways, and Bernie would suffer a disadvantage. The impeachment sidelined Bernie from the campaign trail.
Well, let me be frank. I mean, obviously, when we planned out our schedule, trust me, we were not planning to be in Washington this week. We had set up a number of town meetings all over the state. We usually bring out good crowds, so it's disappointing to me not to be in Iowa talking to the people there. Bernie Sanders, CBS News.
Nobody's fighting for civil rights the way that it should be done. Bernie is the man that does this. Bernie,
I stand behind him because he, to me, is the real deal.
At the age of 21, as a member of a civil rights group at the University of Chicago, I was arrested, spent the night in jail, and I have been committed to the fight against all forms of discrimination, racial discrimination, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, and religious bigotry.
Bernie Sanders is the one to vote for. He's been the same for 50 years.
I will lead an administration that will look like America, will end the divisiveness brought by Trump and bring us together.
The kids know this, the first-time voters, the millennials, they know that he's the real deal.
He identifies as a democratic socialist and says that healthcare is a right. In one letter, Bernie writes, "Let's abolish all laws dealing with abortion, drugs, sexual behavior, adultery, homosexuality, etc."
And he is as for a social democracy. That's why, we believe in him, which will allow for us to be able to live more comfortably.
Bernie Sanders led national polls in January 2020. After all the attacks from Warren and Biden, Bernie still remained the most favorable candidate with a diverse and enthusiastic base. Bernie Sanders was obviously the front runner, but would he be cheated again? Hillary Clinton would be the next to attack the newly declared national frontrunner, Bernie Sanders. She would make claims that Bernie hasn't done anything and that no one likes him. She also refused to commit to him the way he did for her in 2016. Quote, "He was in Congress for years. He had one senator support him. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done. He was a career politician. It's all just baloney, and I feel so bad that people got sucked into it." Hillary Clinton. She would later backpedal her statement after great backlash. Social media responded to Clinton's childish statement with hashtag, quote, "I like Bernie," unquote, which trended #1. Bernie responded with class.
Secretary Clinton, as you know, said that as a senator you got nothing done and that no one likes you. What's your response to that?
On a good day, my wife likes me, so let's clear the air on that one. Look, right now, today, I am dealing with impeachment. We are very proud that the American College of Physicians has just come on board for Medicare for All. Thousands of doctors did an open letter to the New York Times on Medicare for All. And right now, what my focus is on is, outside of the impeachment trial, is doing everything I can to defeat the most dangerous president in modern American history. Secretary Clinton is entitled to, her point of view. My job today is to focus on the impeachment trial. My job today is to put together a team that can defeat the most dangerous president in the history of the United States of America.
Why do you think the Secretary is still talking about 2016?
That is a good question. Ask him. Tonight, we say to Michael Bloomberg and other billionaires, sorry, you ain't gonna buy this election.
You want to be on the debate stage?
If they changed the rules and invited me, I'd be happy to do it. I think I'd do very well.
Michael Bloomberg would buy his way onto the debate stage, once again proving that the DNC is rigging the primary process.
He doesn't have to show he has any support amongst the American people. He can just buy his way onto the debate stage. I watched the debate in Iowa here 2 weeks ago. The DNC will not allow Cory Booker on that stage, will not allow Julian Castro on that stage, but they're going to allow Mike Bloomberg on the stage because he's got $1 billion fucking dollars.
Hill also reported that Bloomberg was surpassing Buttigieg and Warren.
I think the American people are sick and tired of billionaires continuing to have so much influence over the economic life of this country and the political life of this country. Look, a lot of people would like to run for president of the United States, but they don't have $52 billion. They're not going to be able to buy all of the media in California and in other states. And I think that we have got to move away from a system which grants so much power to people who have money. And that's about it.
Michael Bloomberg believes the government has the right to infringe on your freedoms. He also wants to tax the poor and openly caters to the rich, leaving behind the poor. He's also said that legalizing marijuana is, quote, the stupidest thing anybody has ever done. Bloomberg's stop and frisk targeted black Americans and was a strongly racist policy that Bloomberg said keeps people safe. Bloomberg also backed the Iraqi war and doesn't regret it. He opposes Medicare for All, parroting mainstream media lies about the healthcare plan.
The DNC committee nominations consisted of advocates against working class rights and the poor, people within the establishment working for private insurance, and the MIC continued to use money in politics to rig the primaries convention against progressives and working class efforts. Tom Perez's actions would lead to inevitable conflict. Nina Turner would speak out against Perez's actions.
Very disappointing to see Chairman Perez build a list of this magnitude. It also shows a lack of understanding about what the grassroots asked for post the 2016 election. It is an embarrassment. The DNC should be ashamed of itself because it really is a slap in the face to folks who were asking for reform.
Rashida Tlaib would address Tom Perez's committee nominations, bringing attention to the committee members working on Bloomberg's campaign. Rashida called it a conflict of interest. The DNC has shown a lot of favoritism towards Michael Bloomberg. Vice News reported that Bloomberg gave $300,000 to the DNC days before he announced he was running.
Call it a changing of the guard. The 2016 election will mark the first time that millennials make up the largest group of eligible voters, actually overtaking the baby boomers.
Bernie is their compass. They can look to him to keep on a path to sustainability.
Should the person with the most delegates at the end of this primary season be the nominee, even if they are short of a majority?
The DNC was back to their old tricks with coin tosses and election fraud.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to let you go last here because I know your view on this.
Michael Bloomberg would buy his way onto the debate stage in February.
Whatever the rules of the Democratic Party are, they should be followed.
You want the convention to work its will?
Yes.
The DNC has shown a lot of favoritism towards Michael Bloomberg.
Convention working its will means that people have the delegates that are pledged to them.
Let the process work its way out.
Not necessarily, not to listen.
Senator Klobuchar?
Let's pick our president by counting up all the ballots and giving it to the woman or man who got the most votes.
Despite Bernie Sanders winning more votes, Pete Buttigieg would get more delegates.
Let the process work.
The Democratic primaries are rigged against Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders voters.
Senator Sanders.
Well, the process includes 500 superdelegates on the second ballot. So I think that the will of the people should prevail. Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Most votes should become the nominee.
5 noes.
The DNC would invest in a digital system that would be, allegedly, rig-proof. That theory would be tested at the Iowa caucus. CNN would report a landslide for Bernie Sanders in early rounds of voting, and then the DNC was back to their old tricks with coin tosses and election fraud.
Heads.
All right, so Buttigieg will get 3 delegates.
The Buttigieg campaign also funded the app that failed the election, and ultimately rigged the primary caucus. Pete Buttigieg would claim a premature victory, calling it an improbable hope that became an undeniable reality. Despite Buttigieg's claims, CNN contradicted it and said that no candidate seen a victory that night. Bernie's campaign would release results showing 40% of the vote. It showed Bernie Sanders in the lead. The elections were ultimately rigged by greed, arrogance, ignorance, and uncoordination. The Iowa caucus was a sign of the DNC's corruption as well as their incompetence. Bernie Sanders tied with Pete Buttigieg with 11 delegates and got more votes than Pete Buttigieg. Therefore, he declared himself the winner.
Mayor Pete's been declaring a win for days now. Why should people believe your victory speech over his?
Because I got 6,000 more votes. And from where I come, when you get 6,000 more votes, that's generally regarded to be the winner. Yes.
The Bernie Sanders campaign found more than a dozen discrepancies in the Iowa caucus. The results were halted at 99% despite the media claiming victory for Pete Buttigieg. Bernie Sanders would also claim victory, and for good reason. He had more votes than Pete Buttigieg.
I'm very proud that in Iowa, we won the popular vote by 6,000 votes. What was most significant is we increased voter turnout for young people under 29 by over 30%.
Just like in 2016, the DNC will do anything to tip the scale in their favor. Despite Bernie Sanders winning more votes, Pete Buttigieg would get more delegates.
Yes, let's pick our president by counting up all the ballots and giving it to the woman or man who got the most votes.
If Pete Buttigieg had integrity, he would denounce his victory and stand by his words. However, Pete Buttigieg is known for his arrogance, self-entitlement, and would never bend to the will of the people.
Unlike some of the folks up here, I don't have 40 billionaires, Pete, contributing to my campaign.
South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg isn't a representation of the common American. He serves the rich and abandons the poor. He takes super PACs and relies on identity politics to push his corporate agenda. Buttigieg leads the race with the most billionaire donors. According to Forbes, he has at least 40 billionaire donors.
And tonight, Americans everywhere are still shaking their collective heads and looking for answers as to what happened in Iowa. What happened? How was an app designed by Hillary Clinton staffers, of all people, so badly rolled out that it completely messed up the entire Iowa caucus? The other question a lot of Americans are asking themselves tonight is, how is it possible that Pete Buttigieg, who was supposed to finish in 4th place, according to all the polls, even the night before the election, ends up in 1st place? And of course, that is occurring while we are learning that he himself, Pete Buttigieg himself, has very direct links to the app, the faulty app that was used that ended up making him the winner.
Tom Perez received backlash from the Iowa caucus with great reason. Perez failed in his actions to keep his word about a fair and transparent voting process. Pete received up to 14 delegates while Bernie only got 12. Bernie had more people voting for him in Iowa than Pete. Bernie still held on to his claims of victory, having more votes than Pete. The process was rigged by the Iowa Democrats. The process would continue to be rigged even in the New Hampshire primary. Bernie Sanders now has a lot more voters than Pete, but Pete has more delegates, reaffirming that the Democratic primaries are rigged against Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders voters. Polling stations in South Carolina abruptly shut down with no warning. The same would happen prior to Super Tuesday in Texas in areas of Black and Hispanic resident voters.
The Democratic Party would continue to reject Bernie, continuing forth with their agenda for a brokered primary convention. In an effort to stop Bernie Sanders, Pete and Amy would drop out to endorse Joe Biden.
Bernie Sanders was on a clear path to victory in the Democratic primaries. The delegate count favored him as well as the popular vote. However, it is still rigged by the delegate system. The delegates don't have to match the popular vote, showing an undemocratic side to the process. On both sides of the aisle, it's rigged this way. In 2016, certain states were rigged against Trump and Bernie. With the polls heavily favoring him, Bernie could very well pull off the same victory in a rigged electoral process as Trump. Texas was rigged for Biden with long lines and the same voter suppression seen in 2016. CNN reported on the incident, claiming Bernie voters weren't showing up. In all actuality, they were, and after a back-and-forth race in Texas where voter suppression would help Biden. Biden's win was a shock, as Bernie was expected to win. The Black and Latino communities that heavily favored Bernie were forced to wait in lines for hours. rightfully described as voter suppression in Texas has been a common occurrence since 2012. The elections were rigged publicly, with disrespect to the leftist voters.
A website called TDMS Research has gotten a hold of the pre-adjusted exit polls in the Democratic primary elections. Pre-adjusted means before the research company alters the exit polls to fit the unaccountable voting machine results. And in California, the exit polls showed something interesting. They showed Bernie Sanders should have done much better than the voting machines showed. In Texas, the exit polls showed something interesting. They showed Bernie Sanders should have done much better than the voting machines showed. But in Massachusetts, the exit polls showed something interesting. They showed Bernie Sanders should have done much better than the voting machines showed. However, in Vermont, the exit polls showed something interesting. They showed that Bernie Sanders should have done much better than the voting machines showed. Yet, in South Carolina, the exit polls showed something interesting. They showed Bernard Sanders should have done much better than the voting machines showed. However, in New Hampshire, the exit polls showed something interesting. They showed Bernie Sanders should have done much better than the voting machines showed.
The process was held in secret, the exit polls were skewed, and the results of the race were rigged in favor of Joe Biden, the candidate that had least chance of beating Donald Trump.
We have an endorsement from Senator.
No, I think it's rigged against Bernie, but maybe he'll pull it through. It was rigged against me 4 years ago, and I pulled it through.
Biden's emotions and mental state have been questionable. Biden's approach to the presidency has been remarkably similar to Hillary Clinton's, which led to an inevitable loss to Donald Trump via the electoral vote. Voters would continue to be disenfranchised and systematically removed by the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has the right to rig an election, and this is backed up by the Democratic Party's own lawyer, Bruce Spiva. Bruce's statements regarding this have been known to the left as the cigars in backroom speech, in which Spiva told the courts that the Democratic Party can lawfully rig elections and get away with it. This weeds out votes, purges them, allows for voter suppression, and allows for shenanigans to cheat the voters and deceive the media on who is actually winning the race. In reality, the system is deceiving the masses and embracing a corrupt American government that shifts to the movement of dirty money instead of the American people who cast their votes. In the end, the Democratic Party, under Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Donna Brazell, and Tom Perez, have been rigged by the establishment Democrats and the powers that be. The election should have been postponed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Instead, they risked Americans' lives. The Democrats have stooped to a new all-time low, and the world watched. All to push a candidate that was worse than the candidate that lost to Trump in the first place. Democrats' irresponsible nature is morally criminal.